everyone, welcome back to Art Impressions Watercolor Wednesday. This is your guest instructor, Kendra Krebs, and I am so thrilled to be here for the month of August. And this week we have a really adorable little pup kind of looking through a cabin window maybe, and you've got some rustic background here. I really want to show you how to get these hills to sort of overlap in the background and then get our little pup masked into our window with some nice shadows here. So we're only going to be using 2 sets this week. The first set is the watercolor window set, and it's going to be this one, but we have 86'd out the little panels here, and I'll show you how to do that. And then also our little dog. So we are using this little guy this week, and this is in the watercolor dog set. So let's get started. I'm going to use my Canson watercolor paper. And the first stamp I'm going to use is that window. And I'm not going to ink this center paneled area. I'm just going to ink the outside. And I'm using 45 sepia to do that. Make sure you're using the side of the marker because that's going to distribute the most amount of ink. I'm just going to color all along here, making sure to avoid that center area. And I'm just going to stamp this down into the center like that. Once I have my stamp in place, I'm going to take my Post-it paper and just put it all around this window because I'm going to be using a lot of different greens in here. We're going to mask in our pup. So we'll just protect the outside of that window, and then we'll add our water to that at the very end. Get your Post-its in. This is the sticky Post-it paper. You can get this on the Art Impressions website. We'll link below. For the little dog, I've got him on my stamp, and I'm going to use my stamp positioner. So if you've never used one of these are wonderful. It comes with a plexiglass square and a plexiglass positioner, L-shaped positioner. And for this one, I'm going to ink this in the 45 sepia as well. And these are really nice because it doesn't matter how you orient the stamp onto your block. You don't have to try to line it up perfectly or anything like that. So now I have my dog on my square. I can position him where I want him to go. About right there. So I'm happy with that. And I'm going to take the L-shaped positioner and put that into place, and then I'm going to slide away the square and re-ink my dog. So I'll get him re-inked with that 45 sepia. With my positioner in place, I'm going to go ahead and just stamp him in. And it comes out almost perfect every single time. I'll take my brush and just start pulling out some of his shadowed areas. So I had a little bit of color on my brush. I'm going to make sure that I get all of that color off. And I'm going to start pulling out these shadows. And I'm just going to do a basic wash first. And then I'll come back in with my detail tip and a little bit of gray in here. Of course, this little tongue. But just for right now, we're going to give him some shadows. Make sure you leave that highlight on top. I cannot stress that enough. If you do not have that on top, he will look immediately flattened. So you want to make sure you get that nice highlight on top just by leaving it blank. So you can see I'm sort of working my way just very delicately around his face. Because if I touch his little eyes or his nose, I'm going to really pull out a lot of color because those are pretty dense areas. Just going to kind of lightly continue to pull this out. These would all be shadowed areas in here. And bottom of his paws would be shadowed in. Of course, the tops would be highlighted, right? Because those are exposed to the sun. Continue coming around. And I've got my basic shadows placed now, so I'm gonna leave him alone, put in my background, and then I'll come back and finish him up because I really need those shadows to dry before I try to layer in any other color. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start putting in our background. And when we do our background, we're going to use sort of little humps that kind of come back and forth. So if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, use a pencil and just sort of line this out as if, it gives you a little bit of a template to follow. So maybe I'll kind of come like this. And then my second one, you're going to make kind of a Z shape. So maybe my second one will come down like that. And then my third hill is going to come down like this. So it's not going to need to be perfect, but I like to have a little template just for my own benefit to sort of tell me where to go next, so I don't have to do any guessing. Take my palette now, and I'm going to add 72 pine green, 15 olive green. This is 27 olive brown. So I've got my 3 greens here. I'm gonna add a little bit of sepia to this mix. And my sky color, which is going to be the 86 today. I've got a really nice palette now. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to start working from coolest greens in the back to warmest greens in the front. So I'm going to go 72 in the back, 15 in the middle, and 27 in the front. I'll take a little bit of that 72 and I'm going to start just kind of washing this in. It's going to be kind of a light wash, and this is just kind of a basic rundown. We're going to add a little bit of each color into each layer. But just when you're first sort of getting these in, go ahead and stick to the main color. So I'm taking that 72, and you can see I'm not bringing it all the way down to this line because that's where the next hill is going to come. So I need a little bit of a white border between hills. That will help differentiate between hills. I'm just going to lightly dab this color in and move on, because I can always come back in later and add more. So this time I'll take 15 olive green, just adding this color into my hill, and I'm not going to bring it all the way down. I'm just going to bring it till I have a little bit of a border, and you can see a little bit of my sepia from the window is coming through, and that's totally fine. I actually don't mind that at all because there's going to be brown in my hills too, right? Take a little bit more of that olive green and dump it in. Make sure you leave that border. And then in the foreground is going to be our olive brown. And this is going to go all the way across. I do not want to make it a really thick, heavy color all the way down. I do want to sort of leave it as a gradient from darker to lighter as you come down to the window. So I'm going to come in with a little bit more of the olive brown and just bring this around our little pup. Look how happy he is. He just wants to see what's going on inside. All right, just lightly sort of moving around your dog. I just want to let him inside. Okay, so you can see I've got 72 in the back, 15 in the center, and then that 27 olive brown in the foreground. Now I'm going to take and repeat darkening this up just a little bit. And I don't want a perfect line here because we're going to add in our trees. So we definitely want a little hill that's not totally perfect. And remember, that white line is really important to leave. Okay, so remember, we don't want to erase anything pencil-wise until everything is dry. So now that this is still going to dry, we can move back to our dog. I'm a big proponent of going back and forth as things dry, because then you're not tempted to go over it again and continue to try to go over it when it's still wet, because you're not going to be able to create successful layers when the base layer isn't totally dry. It's going to continue to sort of wash out, and you're not going to get a dark shadow in there. So definitely make sure each layer is dry before you go back in with another layer. For our dog, I want to add in a little bit of gray for him. I'm going to take a little bit of that 86, a little bit of that sepia, create a gray, which is this really nice gray. Got a little brown, a little blue. And I'm just going to start pulling this in to our little pup. Just a really light wash. I think I had a little too much blue in there. That's okay. And I'm just, you can see I'm sort of wiping off the water from my brush, because I really want to make sure I don't oversaturate his face with water, because remember, we've got all those really dense areas. His eyes, his mouth, his nose, all of those are really dense color areas. So if we touch those with our brush, they are going to totally spread out and darken up the face real fast. Take a little bit of that sepia, put it in his ears. Notice I'm still leaving that white. See that white border up here? That's his highlight. Taking that sepia, a little bit of this gray that I'm creating by mixing 45 sepia and 86 African violet. Getting a nice shadow in here. Wipe off your brush and blend out those lines. Anytime you put in a shadow, you've got to blend out the harsh line, especially on these little animals. Take that sepia, continue to add in my shading, my shadows, and I'm going to take my detail tip of my sepia now and darken in his mouth, that area there. And I'll come back in and darken in his eyes and his nose, but right now I want to do his tongue. I'm going to use number 89 Persimmon, which is that really pretty bright red, and then also number 30 Rosewood, because I don't want it to be so red, especially on the tip where a highlight would be. I'm going to tone this down a little bit using the Rosewood. It'll kind of give me that pinky color. We'll go ahead and put that into his tongue now. That's really wet, so I need to wait till that dries before I can go in and try to add any shadowing into the back of his tongue. But while he's drying now, I can go back to my background because I know that this is now dry. I'm going to take my 72 Pine Green detail tip, and I'm just going to start putting in really little lines, just like that. And then I'm going to come in and do these little cross lines, almost like cross hatching, to look like tiny little trees in the background. I'm going to do the same thing on this hill with the same color, 72, but these trees are going to be a little bit bigger because these are closer to the foreground, right? And foreground is larger. You will be able to see these trees a little bit better than you would see the ones way back there. Maybe we've got a nice tall one there. And then these ones are going to be quite a bit bigger. Just the same way. Like that. And I'm going to take my sepia and do the same thing. Come back here. And I'm not doing as much. I'm just sort of adding the color, especially into the trunk areas. So these would be the trunks, that would be sepia. And then I can add some of my little stipple dots in here. I probably won't add as many back there just because it would be so far away you wouldn't probably see the stipples. I'm gonna take my brush now and just lightly blend out these trees, just ever so slightly. I still want to keep the integrity of the trees, but I definitely don't want them to be like obviously drawn in with my detail tip. I want them to be more washed in, because even though they're sort of washed out, you can tell that they're trees without having it be like obvious trees, right? Now I'm going to take my little bit of that 72 with my brush and just sort of drop it into the base of those trees. Darken that up just a touch. And take some sepia on my brush and darken up that back area a little bit more. And I'll take that 15 into this front hill, this olive brown hill, and add a little bit there. Just keep adding until you're happy with it. Maybe you want just a little bit more back there. You can do that. Okay, now I'm going to take that persimmon again and darken up his tongue just in that very back area. And that'll give you a nice shadowed area so that it can go from light to dark into the back. And we'll take our detail tip for our puppy and give him little whisker dots. Make sure you fill in his eyes so they're nice and dark. They kind of come to life. Same thing with his nose. Always, always do that. Now we can take our, don't take the tape off yet, we gotta add in our sky. I'm gonna take my 86 African Violet. Now this is pretty blue because I've got a really rustic background back here. I do want to add just a little bit of the brown, make it a little bit of a gray sky. For those of us who live in Oregon, we have lots of gray skies, although Oregon summers are divine. They are just beautiful, gorgeous for just a few months out of the year. And then we go back to gray skies, which I love. I love the rain. I love Oregon fall. You get all kinds of colors and it's beautiful. We've got lots of storms and just lots of rain, a lot of interest. A lot of things going on here. Okay, I'm going to continue putting in my sky, kind of that gray, cloudy sky. You can still put a little bit blue in there because I don't want to go all gray. I still want a little bit of blue in here. Just kind of dump some of the blue in. Soften the sky with just water. Now I can take my Post-it off. And you can see that protected our window. Like that. And this tape is so nice. You can reuse this for several different projects. And I'm going to take my brush again. Now I'm going to start pulling the color out of the little window shutters here. This is just adding some shadows. And this is really just the easiest part is just pulling a little bit of this color out. Remember, you want to leave your highlights. I'm not filling in the whole shutter. Just kind of going around, pulling the color out. Never want to leave anything totally untouched as far as like whites go. So if you wanted to leave your shutters white, even if they were white, they would still have shadows. So you would always need to add your shadows, even if you want to leave something white. Lots of videos on that. So definitely check those out if you're at all curious on how to do that. I'm just pulling the color from the lines, bringing this window to life. And I'm going to add just a bit of a shadow on the outside here using the gray. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that blue again, a little bit of sepia, just very, very, very light. I'm not adding much, just a little something to offset the window. You may not even be able to pick that up on the video. And if you can't, that's how light it should be. Very, very, very light, just a touch of color. So I want this to be overall very, very light on the outside, and then really let the window sort of shine. Take that persimmon, draw a little line down his tongue, take my detail tip, add any details onto the window that we want to do with the sepia. I'll darken this outside edge, that sepia. Add a nice strong line there, as well as down here. And we can erase our lines now in here. Just coming in and erasing those lines. Make sure you get them all. And you'll see how helpful that was, just putting in a little template with your pencil. Now, do you see the white border between the hills? It really sets off those hills, doesn't it? So don't forget to do that. And then always sign your work. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more Watercolor Wednesday videos. And I will see you guys next week. Bye!